We begin Legal Eagles Radio with Sam Pond on Talk Radio 1210 WPHT with an audio clip from the movie Erin Brockovich. We'll tell you why that's relative to the conversation today. We welcome the Delaware Valley Inn, and we welcome the return of Sam Pond to the big chair on a Sunday night, Sam, where today's topic and today's conversation and the subject matter today on mesothelioma and asbestos is going to resonate. I want to caution or alert the listening audience to be prepared to consume an incredible amount of information, despite the fact that you can't pronounce the term or that you struggle with the term. There's a lot to learn.
There's a ton to learn, and that's our job, is to educate. That's the purpose of this show, Joe, as you know. And we're dealing with another injustice. And look, folks, if you were out there, you were in the military, or you were one of the people that got up every day, want to work and build our country, there's a good chance that you were exposed to asbestos. And asbestos is a killer. It's a killer. If it gets into your lungs, the death rate is 100% mortality. And we're going to do a little thing different today, Joe, in the monologue. We're going to do a little true or false test. And I'm going to give you some things that you're going to shake your head at, and you're going to wonder about whether or not these are actually facts. And that's why we're going to have some questions about whether these questions are true or false. In June of 2018, a Russian mining company, Uralbest, one of the largest producers of asbestos in the world, posted photos of packed asbestos material ready for shipping and distribution with a picture of our president, Donald Trump, on it with the quote, approved by Trump, the 45th president of the United States. Joe Doc, true or false?
I'm going to go with true, Sam. It sounds like it's, with the passion in your voice, it sounds true to me.
True. That was there. The Trump administration has known about it for the last 3 months, and they've done nothing about it. Now, why would you say they haven't done anything about it? Because our president has been an advocate over the years for the use of asbestos. True or false?
That's
Trump
true.
said there wasn't any asbestos in the Twin Towers. True or false?
True.
Actually, it's false.
Okay.
There was asbestos in the Twin Towers. In fact, hundreds of first responders died because of exposure to asbestos that was in the Twin Towers. His point was that if it had been there, it was going to be a fire retardant, and therefore the Twin Towers would have not burnt. We have known now that many of the first responders died because they were exposed to asbestos. True or false? Asbestos does not in any way affect our veterans and our military personnel. False. The materials, and we're going to hear from our experts today, the materials that they handled, especially in the Navy, the places where they lived, were all built with asbestos. It's still out there. They're still exposed. True or false? 1 in every 125 men over the age of 50 die of asbestos exposure. True. That is the sad state of affairs that we have. And guess what? Now, under Secretary Pruitt of the EPA, who is running the EPA, we're now having relaxed standards on asbestos. So here we are. We've talked about this so many times, and our listeners have to be educated about what products they're getting exposed to. And the experts are going to tell us that asbestos, Joe, is not only in naval housing, it's not only in bombs, it's in brakes, it's in the things that we use and we put on our kids, and we're going to talk about it. Where are we going to finally understand that profit and greed over the safety and health of our citizens, the lives of our citizens, has to be checked and stopped? We cannot allow profits over the health of our citizens. We cannot allow profits over our environment, and we cannot allow profit to get in the way of our defense. So here we are. We've got an all-star lineup, and I'm going to have Joe Doc introduce two of our guests, and I'm going to introduce, when we get back from the break, we're going to talk to them. He's one of the leading experts with one of the leading firms, Weitz and Luxenberg, that does asbestos nationwide. Is going to tell us more about it. So again, people, listen. You're out in the building trades. You're exposed to asbestos. You'll find out what to look for. You'll find out about the symptoms, and you'll find out what you have to do.
This is Legal Eagles Radio with Sam Pond as we come to you on Talk Radio 1210, WPHT, from the courtroom to the boardroom to right here on Talk Radio 1210, WPHT. Back in a moment.
If you want to talk with Sam Pond or any one of his legal experts, call 800-568-7500. That's 800-568-7500.
There are recommendations that individuals who are at high risk have what are called surveillance exams. Many times these are government-sponsored or union-sponsored, where an individual, even though they have no complaint, may be seen go through a relatively specific and brief series of studies and be determined if they have some form of problem. It may not require any treatment at all, but may identify them as an asbestos-exposed individual.
Back here on Legal Eagles Radio with Sam Pond on Talk Radio 1210 WPHT. Sam, turn the show back over to you. I'm stuck in my chair over the opening true and false. And as I learn more about what is on the agenda for our discussion today, absolutely incredible. Had no idea of the details. And then when you factor in 100% mortality rate, as you referenced, tough stuff to talk about. Tough stuff to. It's a tough reality for many people.
Joe, I think that's a theme throughout a lot of our shows since we began the program, is that you are the layman, you are our audience, so to speak, in that all of this knowledge, all of these things, all of the misunderstanding or the lack of education, the ignorance of our populace in regard to what is out there and what they may or may not be exposed to, that's one of the purposes of this program, to inform them about that and then to say, what are my remedies? We do have a great lineup, and we have with us Alex Eiden, and Alex is going to talk to, look, Alex is with one of the leading firms, Weitz and Luxenberg, renowned firm in throughout the country that does asbestos work. Alex, look, you heard the little clip there about surveillance exam, and you and I were talking about how these cases are found out. Let me just ask you about the surveillance exam. What is a surveillance exam?
So you can get X-rays and CT scans if you're in a particular industry where you've had asbestos exposure, to determine whether or not you have markers that can help get you a further diagnosis.
I may have jumped way ahead. Let's step back and let's talk about the audience, because you see individuals that have been exposed and what they've been exposed to. Can you give us a little sample for our audience to understand, hey, I'm out there, I'm in a job, I'm in the military, where's asbestos at? Where's it? What kind of products is it in?
So it's in an array of products. I'll go through industries first, which would be most susceptible to having exposure to asbestos. As you noted, the Navy. There was tons of asbestos on Navy ships. Auto mechanics, boiler makers, pipe fitters, carpenters, steam fitters, people putting down floor tile, roofers, plumbers, insulators, that's a big one, welders, sheet metal workers, masons, millwrights, people working in the dentist industry. Believe it or not, there was asbestos in dental products. Laborers, steel workers, and painters. There's asbestos in a ton of different products that span many industries.
And again, let me go back again. What is asbestos? Where does it come from? And how does it get into the manufacturing process so that it now comes into mainstream commerce and in contact with our citizens?
So asbestos is a naturally occurring mineral that's mined from the ground. A lot of manufacturers of products like it for its high heat resistance and its strength. They would incorporate it into their various products that they would sell onto the market.
We have recently seen in the news something about this talcum powder. I'm assuming that everybody that's listening knows what talcum powder is, and they've probably put it on their body, or they put it on their child's body, or even their baby's body. Why are we hearing about talcum powder and asbestos? Is there a connection between talcum powder and asbestos in these lawsuits?
There is. In fact, talc powder grows in a similar environment to asbestos, and when you're mining talc out of the ground, you're also getting into pockets of asbestos. And it's being put in your baby powders, in your cosmetic powders, in your shave talcs, face powders, and various other forms of powders that go out for cosmetic purposes.
Oh, wait. Hold on a minute. How does anyone know? Is it on the label? Is there a warning? How do we know that this is out there? Was it on the talc powder? Johnson & Johnson has their brand on there. How do we know if it's in there?
Well, you're not going to know. They never listed asbestos as an ingredient on the product. Talc powder is something that people are learning more and more about these days in terms of asbestos being in there, contaminating the lots of talc. And so it was never on the bottles. People would have never known.
Alex, Joe Doherty, question for you. You just named a ton of products. I'm a building tradesman. I was an iron worker, worked out. And stereotypically, you're always thinking that's where the asbestos is, around the beams and all that, for fire retardant and all those things. But you just named talcum powder and a ton of other products, even when you get your hair cut, things like things that we would never know. Question for you. Are there cases out there involving those type of products?
There are absolutely cases pending in many jurisdictions now, more than ever.
Now, describe those cases to our listeners and tell us what we're talking about here.
So what we're typically seeing now is a younger mesothelioma victim, and you're looking at the case and you're saying, wait, this person didn't work in an industry where there would be asbestos. Their husband wasn't working in an industry where there was asbestos. So where could this have come from? You find out that, they put Johnson & Johnson baby powder or another cosmetic powder on themselves on a daily basis. And that's what caused people to dig a little deeper.
And you mentioned some dental products?
Yeah, there was particular products used in the dental industry that would be used to help in what's called a lost wax molding. And, it's in a product that people would never suspect.
Alex, we keep on using some terms here, asbestos and mesothelioma. What's the difference?
Okay. Mesothelioma is a cancer of the protective lining of your lung, and asbestos is actually the mineral that causes that. The one true cause of mesothelioma is exposure to asbestos.
So the asbestos, which is mined, somehow gets into the air. Someone in the military, someone in working what Joe's thing is an iron worker. You just about named every building trade when you said in regard to occupations. That is somewhere then brought in to you, generally when you're breathing while you're working or in the military, and then it lodges in your lung.
That's correct. It lodges in the lining of your lung. It's the cancer of the lining of your lung, so it's called the pleura, which wraps your lung. And so you're typically exposed when installing something or removing something which creates a respirable dust in your breathing zone.
And I was amazed at the statistics, and I talked about this in a monologue. 1 out of every 125 men over 50 dies in our country from this disease. If you get that lodged into your lung and it becomes mesothelioma, and you now have that cancer, what happens?
What typically will tend to happen is you'll start experiencing shortness of breath. You'll start experiencing extreme weight loss, or your lungs will fill up with fluid. And then you'll begin either getting treatment and fighting the disease aggressively, but you slowly get more and more sick and eventually pass away. The typical prognosis for a mesothelioma victim is anywhere from 4 to 18 months.
Alex, PR. How come this isn't on the front page of every newspaper in America?
It's becoming more and more prevalent nowadays, but it's been a secret that's been kind of covered up by industry over the years.
Joe, we talked about losing the PR for labor and in regard to civil justice because we don't have that kind of money that Madison Avenue does for big business.
This is Legal Eagles Radio with Sam Pond. If you have a question for Sam, call him on the Legal Eagles listener hotline at 1-800-723-8715. When we come back after the commercial break, Pat Eiding will join us, now the president of the AFL-CIO, also former business manager of insulators and asbestos workers, Local Union 14. He'll be along and join us by phone. Back in a moment.
Now back to Legal Eagles Radio with Sam Pond. Talk Radio 1210 WPHT.
Attention, if your loved one has been diagnosed diagnosed with mesothelioma. You may be entitled to monetary compensation, mesothelioma.
Back here on Legal Eagles Radio with Sam Pond on a Sunday night here in the Delaware Valley on Talk Radio 1210 WPHT. Mesothelioma is the topic of conversation. A staggering statistic that Sam, you gave in the opening monologue, still has me trying to process and trying to understand just how it works. It's just it's mind-blowing to me.
Yeah, well, look, Joe, I don't know how many times I've said in different shows about having our listeners and you know, in the union movement, we're going to have folks and leaders from the union movement wake up and start understanding these statistics are staggering. We really have to start waking up and understanding about what we have to do to educate ourselves and get out and vote. Understand the issues, and then really, if you have to get compensation. You have to be holding people's feet to the fire and hold them accountable, and have the responsibility of when you are doing this kind of behavior in our society. We've got to go after them, and we've got the guy right here, Alex Eiden, to go back to it. Alex, I want to return to our discussion about how does someone, they have the symptoms, they were in the building trades, they were in the military, how do they come to you? And if they come to you, what are you looking for? How's the case develop, and what happens?
So when they come to me, it's really kind of a tough time for them. They've just received this devastating news that a loved one or themselves has a terminal cancer. What is critically important for us to do right away is to preserve their testimony and investigate the facts of what they did, what they worked with. A lot of people don't really know that certain products contained asbestos. As we talked about before, it was in a lot of things that people didn't know. So that's where I come in. I help them understand what they did, find out what types of products it was in, preserve their deposition testimony for use at trial later, because they might not be able to make it to trial to tell their story.
And if they have a wife and kids, do the wife and kids, the worker passes away, him or her, after that 18 months, 12 months after being diagnosed, does the wife and the estate have a case thereafter?
They do. It just transitions to a wrongful death case as opposed to a straight-up mass tort personal injury action.
I'm going to jump in at this point, and of all, at the beginning of the show, Alex talked about several building trades that are affected by asbestos. I think that of all those cases involving, asbestos, perhaps there's no other expert that's seen things on the front lines more than our next guest, Pat Eiding, the president of the Philadelphia Council, AFL-CIO, who was also the former business manager of Insulators and Asbestos Workers Local Union 14. Pat, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Joe. Good to be here.
Pat, tell us, we've talked about your experiences, obviously, with mesothelioma. Take us back a little bit to when this really hit the fan and when you got involved.
Well, the history of it, we'd have to go probably a longer show than we have, or longer than I have, going back to, the 1920s when the contractors or the developers and the manufacturers, they did a study on asbestos, found out it was definitely a problem for folks to be around. And then they buried the results of it because they felt they could. They paid for it. So for years, we suffered without any protection whatsoever. We suffered without anybody caring about it or even understanding it, because it's the strangest thing in the world. You look at this thing; it's a mineral that comes out of the ground. It's used for so many different things, and the part that kills you is so small that you can't see it. So the other mystery of it is that you have a Pat Eiding who's able to be on this phone today, and just about everybody I work with, maybe barring about 10%, is dead. And I had the unfortunate experience of burying them. We had a situation in our organization that folks between the ages of 40, 45, and 62 were dying just constantly. We were going to funerals and what have you, and I know in the there was a dialogue about it being the asbestos was outlawed in the early 70s, but it was still being used. There was asbestos all around, people being in contact with it. We put a program in Local 14 that everybody who come on a job had to report to us about the job that had asbestos on it, because at that point I had a partner who was in office with me, a business agent who was 42 years old, came down with mesothelioma. And by the way, the youngest in his family was 6 years old. And so it started a whole lot of different thinking about how we were treating this material, and what are we doing for our people? And, we were so conscious that people were dying early but without help, that in our pension program, we put an amendment in the pension program that somebody like Mike Krebs, who I just referred to, at 42 years old, would die, and our pension regular retirement age was 65. We would plug in all those years for his family, because this is how bad it was for our industry. But I want to jump around a little bit, because it was not just the insulator, the pipe cover, who was breathing this. On a job site, everybody who was around us, listen, we work around pipe fitters, electricians, but everybody was around us was in contact with these fibers that were being made, because we were cutting it either by hand or by power saw. And,
Pat,
not even going into the military end of it, just on a job site, every building trades person who came in contact with the asbestos had the possibility of getting this dreaded disease. By the way, it's the most debilitating disease you can find, barring all cancers. It's a slow, miserable death.
Yeah, Pat, it's Sam. We were talking about the fact that, and Alex was giving a list of who was exposed, and he basically gave a list of every building trade, whether it was carpenters or iron workers or tile setters or painters or sheet metal workers, whomever, because, again, this stuff's blowing through the air. And, we're now seeing, it's a shame, Pat, because, humanity, the suffering that we allow for the sake of $1 to happen to our citizens. And now we're seeing this administration water down a lot of the regulations and the protections that have been at least implemented to deal with having this be in a very blatant way out in industry and having workers handle, or rather the military handle. You're well aware of what's going on now with this administration, aren't you?
Well, Sam, you're absolutely right. In fact, I have members from Local 14 calling me, asking me what are we going to do about this, because he wants to put it back into the mainstream again. He wants to put it back with, the President of the United States doesn't care what it does. And listen, that's the background of this guy. I know him from Atlantic City when he didn't care about people there. But the scary part of it is, Sam, that's one big aspect of it. The other thing we need to know and think about, we're hearing about our schools and asbestos, and without the restrictions and the folks of the unions making sure that when they do something with asbestos, they do it right, we're exposing our kids and everybody else to this kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's just amazing that it's actually happening. There's a quote from Trump's book, The Art of the Comeback, that says that, this was all because of the mob wanted to start tearing buildings down. They controlled all the construction trades. They wanted the jobs, so therefore, the stuff that comes out is so ridiculous. But be that as it may, look, Alex was telling us about how debilitating this is. And, Pat, we've got one thing, and I want everyone to understand it because we've talked about it show in and show out. Everyone wants everybody to be accountable. They want union workers to be accountable. They want them to be responsible. We want no free handouts. And yet we're seeing this behavior continue, and again, also exposing not only workers, not only our military, but also our children. And we've got to be able to have punitive damages hit. This talcum powder thing with Johnson & Johnson, what was revealed by some of the evidence, as far as I understand it, allowed this jury to issue punitive damages of over $100 million. And it's only when they end up paying more for the behavior than the profit that they're making from the product going into society. I want to turn it over to you for a minute, Alex. Joe, do you have something you want to chime in on?
I wanted to ask Pat if there was ever a class action suit brought on by particularly your industry because it has affected so many lives on a daily basis.
Joe, it's a very deep subject, and a lot of it got away from us because because we know what Sam is and we know what his people do for our people. There are other lawyers out there that'll sell these cases for a dime, and what I mean by that is, take 100 cases and get $20,000 settlement for each case. They come out with whether they did $1 million or $20,000, and then all of a sudden these cases are all popping up all over the place. And what the industry started doing, they start filing bankruptcies and trying to take away the monies, and it made the thing so convoluted that in many cases, the real serious cases, and they were all serious as far as I'm concerned, the real serious cases were leaving people and their family, like the one I described with Mike Krebs at 42 years old, leaving them with nothing to be able to gain, because we have a lot of pieces of this now that have let it get away. One is the way it's being done, actually being handled on a job site or in a school or someplace. It's not being protected the way it should be. We fought like hell to get laws to make sure we do this thing right, and it's not. And on the other end, you have folks that are not like Sam's firm. We're caring about us all the time. They're caring about a case. They make their numbers off cases, not off of people. And that's a big difference between what Sam Pond and Alex and those folks do compared to some of those lawyers. So it's an area, Joe, that everybody has to be concerned with what's going on, and we better pay attention, because this little piece of thing that people hear and don't really know how it resonates. There's a 10 to 20 year latency period when you're around asbestos. It may take that long before it shows up. And what's going to happen if we see all this stuff going on without any controls and anybody paying attention to it, and people like the guy in the White House thinks it's okay to do these things, what's going to happen is 10, 15 years from now, you're just going to see kids graduating from school with mesothelioma, for crying out loud. It's a terrible thing we're letting happen here, and he's at the helm, and so we better pay attention to people like Sam and Alex, because if we don't, we're going to lose a lot of friends and relatives. And it'll be similar to what we went through many years ago when we didn't know. Now we know. Shame on us that we let it get away.
Well, Pat, I want to thank you for chiming in. And look, the goal of this show is to educate the people about their rights, about the law, about what's happening, so that they can start having their voices heard. And, you're absolutely right. You make a good point. We're going to have to say goodbye because I'm running out of time. But I want to make a very good point. We've talked about on the show before, lawyers, you got to get lawyers that are going to invest in the case, worry about you, and go to war for you. That's the bottom line for a contingent fee, not to go and get a settlement very quickly. Make sure you get top-notch, quality individuals that are professionals and worried about the client. Again, Pat, great work. Keep fighting. Thank you.
Joe, let me thank you Sam, let me thank you, because you know how passionate I am. I held too many hands that died from this stuff to let it go away without this talking about it. So I want to help you guys who are doing the right kind of thing for our workers out there and our people, generally speaking, all workers, but not just union workers. And I thank you for that, and I'm here to help in any way I can. Thank you so much.
Pat Eiding, president of the AFL-CIO, here on Legal Eagles Radio with Sam Pond, as we come to you on Talk Radio 1210 WPHT. We'll get to a commercial break and return back in a moment.
Oh, yay, oh, yay, oh, yay. God save the United States and this honorable court.
Talk Radio 1210 WPHT, Legal Eagles Radio with Sam Pond.
And back here on Talk Radio 1210 WPHT, special thanks to Pat Eiding, president of the AFL-CIO, for weighing in on our last segment with some very powerful impressions for all of us as a listening audience to be able to digest. One more guest to bring into the program for you, Sam. I'm going to bring in Perry DiVirgilio, who is Director of Labor Standards with the City of Philadelphia. I'm going to bring him into your dialogue with Alex and J-Doc.
Perry, welcome to the show.
All right, thank you. Glad to be here.
Look, we just had Pat Eiding on, and I've been around Pat a lot, so has Joe and Joe, and I think that at the end of that segment that Pat was getting very emotional, having seen so many of his friends pass away and die from this terrible disease. caused by asbestos. And I want to ask you, what is your role in regard to your current position? What do you do in regard to the labor movement, and how are you somewhat of a watchdog?
Well, right now I'm the Director of Labor Standards, and my responsibility is the prevailing wage, enforcing the prevailing wage laws for the city of Philadelphia. My background with asbestos is when I was as business agent for the Labor's Union. I was responsible for handling all the environmental projects, and a lot of those were asbestos jobs.
Perry, Joe Doherty, awesome to have you on the program, and let's talk about that. When you were business agent, former business agent with Labor's Local 332, and you handled the environmental issues, including dealing with asbestos. How prevalent is asbestos in our construction and building trades community even today?
Even today, any of the buildings that were constructed before 1975 all have asbestos in it.
Well, that's scary.
It is. So you deal with the laborers. So you're talking about the demos and refurbishing of massive projects. How did it affect the laborers before, they brought on someone like you? And what programs did you install to curb that type of situation?
Well, I mean, it wasn't exactly me. It was Mr. Sam Staten Sr. who had the vision and to realize how dangerous asbestos was, and in our training school instituted asbestos training programs, hazardous waste, all the environmental stuff. He's the one that basically had the vision to start these classes.
Let me just turn it back to Alex for a minute, and Perry, because Alex is a lawyer that does this kind of work and deals with, as we say in the business, the meso. We call it meso just for short, but mesothelioma.
Yeah, mesothelioma, exactly.
And we've explained that to the audience about that is really the disease that's caused by the fibers that gets into the pleura of the lung.
That's correct.
Alex, let me just ask you this. In Pennsylvania, I get this from being on the job. We were talking about it many times about workers' comp being an exclusive remedy. In Pennsylvania, someone here in Philadelphia built this great city on their backs, gets diagnosed with mesothelioma. It's a work-related cause. Are they able to sue their employer?
In Pennsylvania, you are. There's 4 states around the country that allows you to do that, and it's because of the latency between exposure and development of the disease. Exactly. The Pennsylvania workers' compensation statute allows to 300 weeks from last date of employment to be compensated. Obviously, you're talking about a 10 to 50, 60 years from exposure to development. So these mesothelioma victims were going uncompensated by workers' compensation. And some colleagues of mine out in western Pennsylvania were able to get this turned over so that you can recover against your employer in the tort system.
So if that's only in 4 states, though, you can do that.
Right now, yes, 4 states.
Pat Eiding had talked about, and maybe Perry, you and I know that Alex, you probably see this in your practice, about this latency period. What should people be doing if they think they may have been exposed? Because, again, you're now having this, you're like a walking time bomb, so to speak. Horrible. But what are people supposed to be doing if they think they were exposed? Is there anything they can do to stop this?
So obviously you monitor your health. You can go to your doctors and proactively get scans, CT scans, to see if there's any markers on your lungs, to see if there's any reason for concern. And you're right, though. It is a ticking time bomb if you worked in one of those industries, exposing yourself on a daily basis.
Right. I also think it's important that you document any jobs that you might have worked on where you could have possibly been exposed as well.
Excellent point, Perry. Excellent point for our listeners.
And Perry, let me ask you a question. Employers, we all know what it's like out on the job where everybody's hitting it and getting it. You got, and by the way, shout out to Sam Staten Sr. and Jr. Sam Staten Sr., legend in the business. Do the employers, support the programs that you guys instilled in order to keep the workers safe?
Well, I think just like anything else, you have good employers and bad employers, and the good employers take all the safety measures that they're supposed to, and your bad employers maybe when they bid the job, they didn't bid it right. So then they want to try to take shortcuts so they can maintain their profit. And that's basically where the issues come in at. And then some of the workers take it for granted as well. I mean, even when we have asbestos projects, I mean, it's important that the workers themselves take it serious and, make sure they have their suits on and their respirators and they shower out and do all the things they're supposed to do.
Perry DiVirgilio, Director of Labor Standards, City of Philadelphia, joining us here on Legal Eagles Radio with Sam Pond. Perry, a pleasure to have you part of the program here on Talk Radio 1210 WPHT. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Perry.
Thank you, Perry, very much. And again, just to get back to understanding what we're talking about in regard to, I just want to turn. We're running out of time, but before we this last couple minutes, let's just turn to this talcum powder. What's going on with this talcum powder?
So right now there's cases currently in trial in the state of New Jersey and all around the country. It's there's been an influx in filings ever since people learned about the asbestos being in there. So it's really on the forefront of the litigation as we currently sit here. And to me, I look back and I can actually see some of the faces of the people that I've talked to and said, there's nothing I can do to help you. And it just makes perfect sense that it came from the talc powder. It's really a tragedy that we're just finding out about this.
What happens if somebody, develops meso and they think it's because of that? Is there a statute of limitations? Let's say that they use talcum powder for 20 years. We see you talk about the incubation period of this. Is what can somebody do? And is Sam, in a personal injury case, it's a 2-year window. Can somebody come to a firm and say, listen, I have this. I used talcum powder on my child and myself for 25 years, but I haven't done it in 10 years. Are there any rights there?
Currently, there are not. The 2-year statute of limitations still applies.
What about a class action suit from a large group of people, in the same situation?
So we've yet to do class action suits for mesothelioma cases regarding talc. There are talc cases that are being done in class action for ovarian cancer.
Unbelievable.
So is this really where people are diagnosed with ovarian cancer? Is that the trigger? What should our listeners look for in regard to possibly having talcum powder? I mean, obviously, how to use talcum powder, but what kind of symptoms? Is it the ovarian cancer cases? What?
So for mesothelioma cases, the symptoms you'll experience are shortness of breath, and you can experience extreme weight loss, fatigue, and just not being yourself.
Well, listen, I want to thank you very much, Alex, to join our show. Educational. We could, again, as most shows, Joe, I think we could have another hour, another 2 hours. We could have Pat Eiding on. We can continue talking about the current state of affairs in regard to what's going on. But look, you're going to get a lawyer. The purpose of a trial lawyer is to obviously represent you and then hold the other side accountable. Good trial lawyers are making remedial changes in our society so that these products don't come back because they're making it too expensive for the other side, the people that are killing our citizens.
And it's amazing, Sam. You say this on a constant basis, and the only thing that stops it is the courtroom. By the way, are we making progress here at all, Alex?
We are. They're hit or miss. Some are winning, some are losing. It's up to the jury to determine the facts of each individual case.
And our biggest cities, Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, building trades, you men and women built those cities, these great cities. You've got to be aware, be mindful, stop and think about whether or not this has been affecting you or your loved one.
Special thanks to Alex Eiden from Weitz and Luxenberg for being a part of the show. Nice job, Alex. Well done. And again, a special thanks to Pat Eiding, president of the AFL-CIO, and Perry DiVirgilio from the city of Philadelphia for joining us as well. Special thanks to you, Sam, for hosting and delivering a topic today that has a lot of very powerful ramifications to those who are exposed. Well done by you, J-Doc, today. I almost had to clip your mic. You were talking so much. Nice job, but appreciate it very much. That's going to do it for the broadcast here on Legal Eagles Radio with Sam Pond on Talk Radio 1210 WPHT. Don't forget the Legal Eagles listener hotline, 1-800-723-8715, 1-800-723-8715. 8715. On behalf of J-Doc, on behalf of Alex, on behalf of our guest, and all of our listening audience, and certainly on behalf of our gracious host, Sam Pond, I'm Joe Krause. See you next time, everybody.
This program is a paid commercial announcement and in no way represents the views of WPHT or its management.